Hi everyone. Before watching, please subscribe to our channel, give this video a like and leave a comment. This will help promote this video. Thank you and enjoy watching. The acrid tang of Fixer clawed at my throat, a familiar sensation that used to accompany a surge of anticipation. Tonight, however, it only amplified the dread pulling in my gut. Another rejection letter from Insight magazine sat crumpled on the counter, the ink bleeding through the paper like a fresh bruise. Not quite right for our audience, it read a sterile dismissal that did nothing to soothe the fiery sting of failure. I tossed the letter into the overflowing bin, joining its brethren, a graveyard of hopes and dreams. The harsh overhead bulb cast the dark room in a sterile white glow, highlighting the stark contrast between the crisp white paper and the inky mess that was my latest print. Anger, hot and simmering, threatened to boil over. They just didn't get it, these faceless editors who dictated the taste of the photography world. They craved staged perfection, glossy smiles and posed happiness. But that wasn't what I saw. I saw the truth, the raw, unfiltered emotions that flickered behind every set of eyes. Scooping up the ruined print, I held it against the dim red glow of the safe light. A woman's face stared back, her smile strained and unconvincing. But it was her eyes that held me captive. They were dull, lifeless pools reflecting a hollowness that gnawed at me. This wasn't the capture I'd envisioned. This was despair. A sigh escaped my lips, heavy with frustration. My gaze drifted across the room, landing on a dusty portfolio tucked away on a shelf. With a pang of nostalgia, I pulled it out, flipping through the worn pages. These were my early works, a collection of candid shots, each one a portal to the soul. There was a child, eyes wide with wonder as he chased a butterfly. An elderly couple, their gazes locked in a silent conversation that spoke volumes of a love that endured. Each image pulsed with life, a symphony of emotions played out on the canvas of the human eye. A spark ignited within me, a flicker of defiance against the rejection that had become my norm. Maybe this, the raw truth whispered in every flicker of an iris, was what they'd been looking for all along. Maybe it was time to stop trying to fit their mold and start showcasing the unfiltered beauty of human emotion, one captivating eye at a time. The clatter of the doorknob startled me, pulling me back to the present. Amelia, my girlfriend, stood framed in the doorway, her silhouette backlit by the hallway light. Her usual bright smile was absent, replaced by a frown that mirrored the one etched on the ruined print in my hand. Another rejection, she asked softly, her voice laced with concern. I forced a smile, the gesture feeling hollow. Just not their cup of tea, I guess. She stepped closer, her eyes searching mine. Usually, they sparkled with a warmth that could chase away any darkness. Tonight, however, they held a flicker of something else, a dullness that echoed the despair in the photograph I clutched. Maybe it was the harsh light, or maybe it was just my imagination. But for the first time, a seed of unease took root in my mind. What if the darkness I saw reflected in my work wasn't just in the photos, but in Amelia's eyes as well? Rain lashed against the window pane, a rhythmic counterpoint to the frantic tapping of my fingers on the keyboard. My search history was a graveyard of unsettling terms, melancholy in eyes, decoding iris patterns, hidden emotions in pupils. Frustration gnawed at me. Days turned into weeks. Each photograph I took a reflection of Amelia's growing despondency. The vibrant joy that once shone in her eyes had been replaced by a dull ache, a hollowness that mocked my attempts to capture anything remotely cheerful. "Hey, are you okay?" Amelia's voice, laced with concern, broke through my digital trance. She stood in the doorway, her frame dwarfed by the overflowing boxes threatening to swallow my tiny apartment. I whipped around, forcing a smile, just researching some inspiration. She raised an eyebrow, skepticism dancing in her eyes. For another eye portrait. You know your apartment is starting to look like a serial killer's lair with all these photos. A weak chuckle escaped my lips. Hardly. Just trying something new. She crossed the room, picking up a framed photo from a stack. The image captured a young woman, eyes downcast, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us. This one, it feels different. Amelia finally whispered, her voice barely above a murmur. You captured her sadness so perfectly, without it being staged. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Was she seeing what I saw? The raw truth laid bare in every blink, every flicker of an eyelid. Maybe that's what people are looking for. I ventured, my voice hesitant. Something real, something that speaks to the soul. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Maybe they are. Maybe you're onto something here. She turned to leave, her gaze lingering on the photo before she met mine. Just try not to get lost in all these sad eyes, she pleaded, a hint of worry in her voice. I noted, my throat tightening with a sudden surge of protectiveness. Lost in sad eyes. No, lost in Amelia's eyes, the one set I yearned to see sparkle with joy once again. But how? The question echoed in the silence long after she left, a terrifying echo that threatened the burgeoning hope in my heart. The now familiar sting of rejection settled in my gut, a dull ache that mirrored the dejection creeping into Amelia's eyes. Another email from Insight, another polite dismissal. This time, their words felt particularly dismissive, a critique that bordered on condescending. While your recent work exhibits a certain unconventional approach, the email read, it lacks the commercial appeal we strive for. I crumpled the email into a ball and tossed it in the overflowing bin, joining its countless brethren. Fury battled with despair in my chest. They didn't get it. They couldn't see the raw, unfiltered humanity I captured in every iris. Frustration gnawed at me, turning my gaze towards Amelia, curled up on the worn sofa. Another one, she asked, her voice barely a whisper. I noted, sinking down beside her. The warmth of her body offered a small comfort, a stark contrast to the icy dread that had taken hold. We sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the rhythmic drumming of rain against the window. Maybe this photography thing isn't meant to be, she said finally, her voice laced with a hint of resignation. Maybe it's time to find something else. A surge of defiance flared within me. No, I wouldn't give up. Not when I was so close, so very close to capturing the essence of human emotion, the stories whispered in every flicker of an eye. No, I said, my voice surprisingly firm. They're wrong. This is what I'm meant to do. I just need to find the right audience. Amelia turned to face me, her brow furrowed in concern. But what if there isn't one? What if your vision is just too dark? My gaze drifted to a framed photo on the bookshelf. It was an old picture of myself, taken before the accident. My eyes then sparkled with a youthful optimism, a stark contrast to the haunted depths that stared back at me from the mirror now. An unsettling thought took root in my mind. Was my work becoming a reflection of myself, a twisted mirror reflecting the despair that had seeped into my soul? Maybe, I admitted, the word escaping my lips in a ragged whisper. But maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe capturing darkness is a way to confront it, to understand it. Amelia reached out, her fingers tracing the outline of my face. Just be careful, okay? Don't let the darkness consume you. Her words hung heavy in the air, a stark warning that echoed the growing unease within me. Was I chasing shadows, or was there a deeper truth hidden within the depths of every human eye? The answer, like the emotions I desperately sought to capture, remained elusive, shrouded in the murky depths of the human soul. The click of the shutter echoed hollowly in the sterile white room. Amelia sat across from me, bathed in the harsh glare of the overhead light. Her eyes, the very subject I craved to capture, held a vacant quality that sent shivers down my spine. They were the same eyes I fell in love with, windows to a soul that brimmed with laughter and warmth. Now they were like empty landscapes, devoid of the vibrant emotions that once danced within. "One more," I pleaded, my voice tight with a growing desperation. "Just one more perfect shot." Amelia offered a wan smile, her lips barely moving. "Sure," she whispered, her voice devoid of its usual vibrancy. Click, click, click. The camera whirred to life with each press of the shutter, but the image on the screen remained the same. A hollow shell of a woman, her eyes reflecting nothing but a chilling emptiness. Frustration gnawed at me, a bitter aftertaste in my mouth. Where was the fire, the spark that used to ignite within her? Was it hidden somewhere behind that vacant gaze, or was it truly gone, extinguished by a darkness I couldn't understand? Maybe we should take a break," Amelia suggested, her voice laced with a hint of fatigue. "I feel a little drained." Shame clawed at me. Was I so consumed by my artistic vision that I hadn't noticed the toll it was taking on her? I set the camera down with a sigh, the weight of my obsession pressing down on me. "You're right," I admitted, forcing a smile. "Let's grab some coffee. Maybe a change of scenery will spark something new." As we walked down the street, the bustling city life felt distant, muted by the oppressive silence between us. A stolen glance at Amelia confirmed my worst fears. The hollowness in her eyes wasn't just in the photographs. It was a living, breathing thing, a shroud that threatened to envelop her entirely. "Is there something wrong?" I finally asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Something you're not telling me." Amelia stopped walking, her gaze drifting towards a nearby cafe. A flicker of something, perhaps defiance, sparked in her eyes for a brief moment before being replaced by the same bleak emptiness. "No," she said, her voice flat. "Everything's fine. Just tired, I guess." Her words rang hollow, a flimsy veil that couldn't hide the storm brewing beneath the surface. A terrifying realization dawned on me. The darkness I saw reflected in my photographs wasn't just artistic inspiration, it was a chilling premonition. And if I couldn't find a way to pull Amelia back from the brink, I might just lose her entirely. The train rattled along the tracks, each bump echoing the tremor in Maya's stomach. 5 sections deep into the belly of the steel serpent, the air grew stale and thick. Sweat beaded on her forehead, a cold contrast to the nervous fire coiling in her gut. Across the aisle, a weathered man with eyes like polished amber studied her, concern etched lines around his mouth. "Rough trip, kid." His voice was a low rumble, worn smooth by years of gravel roads and hard truths. Maya managed a weak nod. The past few days had been a whirlwind, a desperate escape, a frantic scramble for passage, and now this rickety train hurtling towards an uncertain future. Running from something, the man pressed gently. The question hung heavy in the air. Could she trust him? His gaze held a curious warmth, devoid of judgment. "Maybe," she finally admitted, her voice barely a whisper. A knowing smile tugged at the corners of his lips. "We all run from something at some point, child. But sometimes, the real fight is learning to stand your ground." His words struck a chord deep within her. Running had become her default, a well-worn path, etched by fear. But was there another way? A way to face the shadows instead of fleeing from them? The train lurched to a halt, screeching metal against metal. The man rose, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the grimy floor. "This is my stop," he said, extending a weathered hand. "Remember, even the smallest pebble can divert the course of a raging river." With a final enigmatic wink, he stepped off the train, disappearing into the dusty haze of the platform. His words echoed in Maya's mind as the train lurched back into motion. A pebble diverting a river? It seemed impossible, yet a flicker of hope ignited within her. Maybe facing her fears, however daunting, was stronger than the paralyzing grip of running. Hours blurred into one another, the rhythmic clack of the train wheels a monotonous lullaby. Maya watched the unfamiliar landscape roll by, a kaleidoscope of browns and greys. Suddenly, a young woman with fiery red hair and eyes that mirrored the stormy sky outside burst into their compartment. "Is this seat taken?" she asked, her voice laced with a hint of impatience. Maya shook her head, scooting over to make space. The redhead plopped down with a sigh, her backpack thudding against the floor. Finally found an empty seat, she grumbled. "This train is packed like a sardine can." A tentative smile touched Maya's lips. "First time." The redhead snorted, as if, "I'm on my way to Westlake." "Westlake? That's where I'm headed to," Maya blurted out, surprised by her own boldness. The redhead's gaze sharpened. "Really? What brings you to that dusty old town?" Maya hesitated. Should she confide in this stranger, someone as transient as the passing scenery? Taking a deep breath, she started, "I'm looking for a new start." The redhead's lips stretched into a grin. "Well, then buckle up, kid. Westlake might just be the place you're looking for." As the train hurtled onwards, the two women fell into conversation, shading stories and dreams under the flickering fluorescent lights. A fragile bond formed, a testament to the connections forged in the most unexpected places. The setting sun cast long shadows across the horizon as the train finally pulled into the Westlake station. Maya stepped onto the platform, a nervous thrill thrumming through her veins. Westlake stretched before her, a dusty sprawl of ramshackle buildings and faded dreams. This was it, the unknown. But for the first time, fear wasn't the only emotion gripping her heart. A sliver of hope, fragile yet persistent, whispered of new beginnings. The dusty streets of Westlake seemed to stretch on forever under the unforgiving midday sun. Sweat stung Maya's eyes as she trudged along, the weight of her backpack a constant reminder of her meager belongings. The grand dreams she'd nurtured on the train journey felt a tad deflated in the harsh light of reality. A weathered sign hanging precariously above a crooked doorway creaked in the breeze. The rusty nail, "Rooms for rent." Hope flickered. This could be it. Pushing open the creaking door, Maya was greeted by a dim, cavernous space. The air hung heavy with the smell of stale beer and something vaguely unpleasant. Behind a chipped counter sat a burly man with a face like a crumpled road map. "Looking for a room," he rumbled, his voice thick with molasses. Maya nodded, her throat suddenly dry. The man gestured towards the back with a thumb. "Top floor, $10 a night, cash only." $10 seemed a steal, but a sliver of apprehension snaked down her spine. This place oozed a certain disreputability. Taking a deep breath, she plumped down a crumpled bill. The man grunted, shoving a key towards her with a grime-encrusted finger. The room was small and stuffy, the only window overlooking a narrow alley overflowing with overflowing bins. But it had a bed, a rickety chair, and most importantly, a lock on the door. It would have to do. Exhaustion finally claimed her, and Maya collapsed onto the lumpy mattress, sleep a welcome escape from the harsh realities of her new home. She was awakened by a persistent knocking on the door. Groggily, she stumbled to her feet, peering through the cracked wood. A young woman with fiery red hair stood outside, a mischievous glint in her eyes. "Maya, right?" she said, pushing past the door before Maya could even respond. "We're going exploring." It was the redhead from the train, the one heading to Westlake too. What was her name again? "Don't worry about your stuff," the redhead said, seemingly reading Maya's mind. "This town isn't exactly crawling with thieves." A hint of a smile played on her lips, although maybe keep an eye out for tumbleweeds. With a laugh, she grabbed Maya's arm and dragged her out of the room. The afternoon sun beat down, but there was a spark of energy in the redhead's eyes that was contagious. They wandered through the labyrinthine streets, past buildings that looked like they might topple over with a stiff breeze. The town was a curious mix of dusty neglect and a strange, almost defiant resilience. "This place is a dump," Maya admitted, a reluctant smile tugging at the corners of her lips. The redhead snorted. "Maybe, but it's also full of possibilities. Just got to know where to look." They ended up at a small, ramshackle diner tucked away on a forgotten side street. Inside, a motley crew of locals sat hunched over steaming mugs of coffee, the air thick with conversation and the aroma of greasy food. The redhead slid into a booth, dragging Maya along with her. A gruff-looking waitress with a shock of purple hair slapped 2 menus on the table. "What'll it be, darlings?" she barked, her voice surprisingly melodic. As they pored over the greasy menus, Maya couldn't help but feel a flicker of excitement. Westlake might be rough around the edges, but it was undeniably alive. And maybe, just maybe, there was a place for her in this strange, vibrant town. Days blurred into weeks, each one a lesson in the strange rhythm of Westlake. Maya found a routine. Mornings spent hunched over a steaming cup of coffee at the diner. The redhead, whose name she finally learned was Fiona, by her side. Afternoons spent scouring dusty shelves in the ramshackle bookstore for hidden gems, and evenings spent listening to the eclectic stories spun by the regulars at the Rusty Nail. Life in Westlake wasn't easy. The room was cramped, the food sometimes questionable, and the constant murmur of unease beneath the town's surface was undeniable. But there was a sense of community here, a tapestry woven from shared experiences and a fierce independence. One afternoon, while browsing the dusty aisles of the bookstore, Maya stumbled upon a faded poster tucked behind a forgotten first edition. It depicted a woman with fiery hair, a guitar slung across her back, a mischievous glint in her eyes. "Open mic night at the Rusty Nail, unless you're in a rock star," the bold lettering declared. A nervous laugh escaped Maya's lips. Singing in public, not exactly her forte, but Fiona, who materialized beside her like a phantom, seemed to have other plans. "You should do it," she declared, her voice laced with an infectious enthusiasm. "You've got a voice like a hidden melody. Maya just needs a little encouragement to come out." Maya's cheeks flushed. "I can't sing," she mumbled, shoving the poster back into place. Fiona's gaze narrowed playfully. "Don't be ridiculous. Everyone has something to offer. Besides, it'll be fun. You, me, and maybe a couple of bottles of courage from the Rusty Nail's finest selection." The image of facing a room full of strangers, armed with nothing but shaky courage and a questionable vintage microphone, filled Maya with dread. But Fiona's unwavering belief and a growing desire to break out of her shell began to chip away at her fear. "All right," Maya finally said, the word a shaky exhale. "But you're buying the encouragement." Fiona threw her head back and laughed, a sound as vibrant and alive as the dusty town itself. Deal? The night of the open mic arrived, and with it, a fresh wave of nervous energy. The Rusty Nail was packed, a motley crew of locals crammed into the dimly lit space. Maya sat huddled in a corner booth, Fiona by her side, a bottle of amber liquid their only shield against the rising tide of apprehension. One by one, hopeful souls took to the rickety stage, their voices a mix of raw talent and endearing off-key charm. Each performance chipped away at Maya's fear, replaced by a grudging admiration. Then Fiona nudged her, a mischievous glint in her eyes. "Your turn, Songbird." Before Maya could protest, Fiona was dragging her towards the stage. The spotlight felt blinding, the faces before her a blur. Taking a deep breath, Maya closed her eyes, the melody of a song from her childhood welling up within her. Her voice, initially shaky, began to find its strength. The words flowed, a whispered story of resilience and hope. When she finished, a hush fell over the room. Then it erupted into a thunderous applause. A nervous smile bloomed on Maya's face. For the first time since arriving in Westlake, she didn't feel like an outsider. In that moment, under the harsh glare of the spotlight, she felt a glimmer of belonging. Maybe, just maybe, this dusty town, with its quirky characters and hidden stories, was exactly where she was meant to be. The news spread like wildfire through Westlake's dusty streets. Maya, the shy newcomer, the girl from the train, was a hidden songbird. The following weeks were a whirlwind of impromptu performances, Fiona by her side as both cheerleader and impromptu manager. They played at the Rusty Nail, of course, the applause now laced with a familiar warmth. But they also ventured further, to the dusty cantina on the outskirts of town and the quaint cafe run by a one-armed baker with a heart of gold. One crisp autumn evening, they found themselves at the Howling Coyote, a ramshackle bar on the edge of town known for its eclectic clientele and even more eclectic music nights. The air inside was thick with smoke and the sounds of a bluesy harmonica. Fiona nudged Maya towards the sign-up sheet. "Tonight's the night," she declared, a mischievous glint in her eyes. Maya hesitated. The Howling Coyote was notorious for its rough crowd. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the din. Fiona squeezed her hand reassuringly. "We'll be fine. Besides, a little challenge never hurt anyone." Taking a deep breath, Maya scribbled her name on the list, a tiny rebellion against her own fear. The night unfolded in a blur of raucous laughter, foot-stomping music, and surprisingly appreciative shouts from the barflies. As their final song faded into the smoky haze, a gruff voice boomed from the back of the room. "Not bad, kid. You got a voice like a rusty nail on a chalkboard, but somehow it works." The room erupted in laughter, Maya included. The gruff voice belonged to Hank, the barkeep, a man whose scowl could curdle milk and whose bark was far worse than his bite. He might not have been a fan of her singing style, but his gruff compliment felt strangely validating. Later, as they walked home under a sky ablaze with stars, Fiona nudged Maya with her elbow. "See? Not so bad, was it?" Maya grinned. "Not bad at all. Maybe Westlake isn't so bad either." The town, once a symbol of uncertainty, now felt like a tapestry woven with experiences, both terrifying and exhilarating. She had found her voice, not just in song, but in the quiet confidence that bloomed within her. "Hey," Fiona said, her voice thoughtful. "Remember that first night at the Rusty Nail? You were scared to even think about singing." A soft chuckle escaped Maya's lips. "Yeah, I was a mess." Fiona's smile widened. "Look at you now, Westlake Songbird. Who knows what crazy adventures await us next?" Maya gazed up at the star-dusted canvas above, a newfound sense of possibility warming her heart. Westlake, with its dusty streets and hidden stories, might not have been the fresh start she'd envisioned, but it had become something far more meaningful, a place where she could finally sing her own song, a place where she could finally belong. A crisp winter wind whipped through Westlake's dusty streets, sending tumbleweeds skittering across the deserted sidewalks. The town, usually abuzz with a chaotic energy, seemed to be holding its breath. A heavy silence hung in the air, broken only by the mournful wail of a distant train. Maya huddled deeper into her coat, the familiar unease that had settled over Westlake a few weeks ago gnawing at her. Whispers of trouble, of a darkness lurking at the town's fringes, had become impossible to ignore. Pushing open the creaky door of the Rusty Nail, she was greeted by an even more subdued atmosphere than usual. Hank, the gruff barkeep, sat behind the counter, his face itched with worry. A handful of regulars huddled in a corner booth, their conversation hushed and punctuated by worried glances towards the window. "What's going on?" Maya asked, her voice barely a whisper. Hank slammed a mug of steaming coffee in front of her. "Trouble, kid. Real trouble." He leaned closer, his voice low. "There's been talk of outsiders, a group moving in from the south. Not the kind of folks you want hanging around." Fear coiled in Maya's stomach. Westlake, for all its quirks, had become her home. The thought of outsiders disrupting the fragile peace of the town filled her with a sense of protectiveness. "What are they going after?" she asked, her voice stronger than she felt. Hank shook his head. "Nobody knows for sure. Some say resources. Some say they're looking for trouble. Either way, it ain't good." A heavy silence descended, broken only by the rhythmic ticking of the dusty clock on the wall. Maya knew then that Westlake wouldn't simply wait for the storm to pass. This ragtag community, with its motley crew of characters, had a fierce sense of independence. They wouldn't go down without a fight. Across the room, Fiona materialized from the shadows, her fiery hair a beacon in the dim light. Her usual mischievous glint was replaced by a steely determination. "We'd a plan," she declared, her voice ringing with quiet authority. Over steaming mugs of coffee, they huddled together with the regulars, a mix of anxieties and a surprising amount of bravado swirling in the air. Hank, the gruff barkeep, surprisingly emerged as a leader, his knowledge of the surrounding area and his gruff demeanor strangely reassuring. By the time the last embers of daylight faded, a plan, as haphazard as it was valiant, had taken shape. Westlake, the dusty town on the edge of nowhere, was preparing to face whatever darkness may come. As Maya looked around the room at the determined faces, a surge of pride welled up within her. This community, her community, wouldn't back down. They would stand together, and maybe, just maybe, they would find a way to weather the coming storm. The tension in Westlake hung thick as the approaching dust cloud on the horizon. The once vibrant town was now a fortress of sorts, windows boarded shut, doors secured with anything they could find. Inside the Rusty Nail, a motley crew of Westlake's finest, Hank the gruff barkeep, a surprisingly handy old woman named Martha with a glint of steel in her eye, and a nervous young man named Billy with a trembling hand wrapped around a rusty wrench, gathered around Maya and Fiona. "All right, listen up," Fiona said, her voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor in her hands. Hank's gruff demeanor seemed to be rubbing off on her. "We don't know what we're up against, but we know one thing. Westlake is ours. We defend it." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Fear was evident, but so was a fierce determination to protect their home. Maya scanned the faces, her own heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. These weren't hardened warriors, but ordinary people united by a love for their quirky, Dusty Town. "We have a plan," Hank rumbled, his voice surprisingly calm. He outlined their strategy, a mix of cunning diversions and makeshift defenses, utilizing the town's labyrinthine layout and the knowledge of its hidden nooks and crannies. The dust cloud grew larger, morphing into a line of rumbling vehicles kicking up a brown haze that choked the air. A collective breath was held in the Rusty Nail. This was it. The first outsider, a hulking figure clad in black, emerged from a cloud of dust. He scanned the deserted street, a sneer twisting his lips. But before he could take another step, a deafening clang echoed from a nearby alleyway. A metal sheet, loosened by Martha's nimble fingers the night before, came crashing down, narrowly missing the surprised intruder. Chaos erupted. Yelling figures materialized from doorways and windows, a cacophony of makeshift weapons and loud voices creating a confusing spectacle. The outsiders, expecting an easy takeover, were caught off guard. "Remember the plan," Fiona shouted, her voice hoarse but unwavering. She and Maya weaved through the back alleys, leading a small group towards a hidden exit they'd discovered earlier. Their objective: to cut off the outsiders' escape route and prevent reinforcements. The air was thick with dust and the metallic tang of fear. They sprinted through a labyrinth of forgotten gardens and crumbling sheds, finally reaching a rickety wooden bridge spanning a dry creek bed. This was it, their makeshift blockade. With a collective heave, they pushed against the bridge, its weathered planks groaning in protest. Just as the first outsider rounded the corner, the bridge gave way with a deafening crash, sending a plume of dust into the air and the unsuspecting outsider tumbling into the dry creek bed below. Relief mingled with a surge of adrenaline flooded Maya. They'd done it. They'd actually pulled it off. Looking back, she saw Fiona give her a thumbs up, a grin splitting her dirt-streaked face. The battle raged on, but the tide had turned. Westlake's ragtag defenders, fueled by a fierce love for their home, had surprised and outmaneuvered the outsiders. One by one, the intruders were sent packing, retreating in a cloud of dust and frustrated yells. As the last rumble of a departing vehicle faded into the distance, a weary silence descended upon Westlake. Emerging from their hiding places, the defenders surveyed the damage: a few broken windows, a dented water tower, but nothing that couldn't be fixed. More importantly, they were still standing. Westlake, the dusty town on the edge of nowhere, had defied the odds. In the middle of the deserted street, Maya found Fiona, a tired smile etched on her face. They leaned against each other, the weight of the battle slowly draining away. "We did it," Maya whispered, a shaky laugh escaping her lips. Fiona nodded, her fiery hair catching the last rays of the setting sun. "We sure did, Maya. We sure did." Westlake, with its quirky characters and dusty resilience, had proven its mettle. The future remained uncertain, but one thing was clear: this town, and the bond forged in the heat of battle, would weather any storm. The aftermath of the battle settled over Westlake like a dusty haze. The once vibrant town hummed with a subdued energy as residents surveyed the damage and began the long process of repairs. Broken windows were boarded up with salvaged wood, dented water tanks patched with whatever metal scraps they could find. A spirit of weary camaraderie filled the air, a shared understanding of the town's resilience forged in the crucible of conflict. Inside the Rusty Nail, a sense of accomplishment mingled with a quiet anxiety. Hank, the gruff barkeep, surveyed the room, his gaze lingering on the chipped mugs and overturned tables. Despite the victory, a shadow of worry etched lines on his face. "They might be back," he rumbled, his voice heavy with apprehension. Fiona, ever the optimist, perched herself on a bar stool, a defiant glint in her eyes. Maybe, but they also learned something today. Westlake doesn't go down without a fight. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. The battle, though won, had served as a stark reminder of the dangers that lurked beyond their dusty borders. A newfound vigilance settled over the town. Maya sat huddled in a corner booth, sipping on a lukewarm cup of coffee. Exhaustion clawed at her limbs, but a strange sense of peace also settled in her heart. She had faced her fears, not just during the battle, but in the weeks leading up to it. Westlake, this quirky, dusty town, had become her home, a place where she had found her voice and, more importantly, a sense of belonging. A weathered hand landed on her shoulder. Looking up, she met Martha's gaze, the sharp glint in the old woman's eyes softened by a flicker of warmth. "You did well, child," Martha said, her voice surprisingly gentle. "Braver than you think." Maya offered a shaky smile. "We all did." Martha nodded, her gaze sweeping over the room. This town, it has a way of finding the strength in its people, even the unexpected ones. The unexpected ones. The phrase hung in the air, a silent acknowledgement of Maya's journey. She had arrived in Westlake a scared newcomer, but the town had embraced her, its dusty streets and quirky inhabitants becoming the backdrop for her own transformation. Fiona slid into the booth beside her, a mischievous grin playing on her lips. "So," she said, her voice laced with a playful challenge, ready for the next adventure. A hesitant smile bloomed on Maya's face. "What kind of adventure?" Fiona shrugged, her fiery hair catching the dim light filtering through the dusty window. "Westlake always has a surprise or two up its sleeve. We just got to be ready to face them, Songbird." With a shared laugh, they joined the murmur of conversation filling the room. The future remained uncertain, but Maya no longer faced it alone. Westlake, with its battle-tested spirit and its quirky inhabitants, had become her anchor, a place where she could finally sing her own song, a place where she finally belonged. Months blurred into one another, painting Westlake in the warm hues of summer. The repairs were complete, the scars of battle fading under a fresh coat of paint, and the tireless work of its residents. A sense of normalcy, albeit a vigilant normalcy, returned to the town. One sunny afternoon, Maya sat perched on a stool outside the dusty bookstore, flipping through a well-worn copy of poetry. Fiona, ever the whirlwind, materialized beside her, a flyer clutched in her hand. "Look what I found," she declared, her voice brewing with excitement. "Traveling Music Festival, coming to Cactus Creek next month." Cactus Creek. The name held a faint echo in Maya's memory, a whisper from her past life before Westlake. A life she'd left behind, a life intertwined with music. Cactus Creek, Maya echoed, a flicker of apprehension battling with a surge of long-dormant yearning. "Isn't that?" Fiona's smile faltered slightly. "Yeah, it's where you used to play, right? Before you, well, ended up here." The memory of crowded stages and flashing lights filled Maya's mind. A part of her, a part she'd buried deep, still yearned for the thrill of performance. But another part, the part that had found solace in Westlake's dusty embrace, felt a pang of fear. "I don't know," Maya mumbled, her voice laced with uncertainty. Fiona studied her with a knowing gaze. "You haven't sung in months, Maya. Not even at the Rusty Nail. Maybe this is the push you need." Maya's gaze drifted across the street, landing on the Rusty Nail's faded sign. It was there, under the harsh spotlight of that rickety stage, that she'd first found her voice, a voice not just for singing, but for facing her fears. Taking a deep breath, she met Fiona's eyes. "All right," she said, a hint of defiance in her voice. "Let's do it. Let's see what Cactus Creek has in store. The following weeks were a whirlwind of practice and preparation. Dusty sheet music was unearthed, forgotten melodies reawakened. Fiona, ever the cheerleader, transformed into a makeshift manager, helping Maya polish her performance and navigating the festival application. The day of the festival arrived, a scorching summer day that shimmered with a nervous excitement. Cactus Creek, once a familiar haven, now felt foreign. Backstage, the clamor of tuning instruments and excited chatter filled the air. Maya, surrounded by seasoned performers, felt a wave of self-doubt threaten to engulf her. "You got this," Fiona declared, squeezing Maya's hand. "Westlake Songbird, remember?" A smile, hesitant at first, bloomed on Maya's face. Westlake, the dusty town, its quirky inhabitants, and the unwavering support they'd shown her. That was her strength. Taking a deep breath, she stepped onto the stage, the blinding lights momentarily taking her breath away. But then, as the first notes of her song filled the air, a calmness washed over her. She closed her eyes and sang, her voice carrying the stories of Westlake, of resilience and hope. When the final notes faded, the crowd erupted in applause, a wave of appreciation that washed over her. Later, backstage, Fiona grinned at her, her eyes sparkling with pride. "See? You were amazing." Maya couldn't help but smile back. It wasn't just the performance, though that had been exhilarating. It was the realization that a part of her past life could coexist with the new life she'd built in Westlake. She was no longer just the girl who ran away. She was Maya, the Westlake Songbird, a woman who had found her voice, her courage, and her home in the most unexpected of places. As they walked back towards Westlake, under the starlit summer sky, a sense of peace settled over Maya. The road ahead might be uncertain, but with Fiona by her side and Westlake in her heart, she knew she was ready to face whatever came next. After all, Westlake, the dusty town on the edge of nowhere, had a way of finding the strength in its people, even the unexpected ones. And tonight, Maya felt stronger than ever.